Debby slows to a crawl and broadens out off the coast of South Carolina on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for August 7th. So an active tropics with quite a few storms still active. Of course, Debby still the main feature, but also the development of a new tropical storm by our analysis near the Ogasawara island chain of Japan in the Western Pacific. We're code yellow for Debby right now, and those two storms in the Eastern Pacific as well, and two remnant lows. Very busy times over there. Day 68 of Atlantic hurricane season. We have Tropical Storm Debby, barely holding on as a tropical storm at the moment, but could strengthen a bit more, and an area of interest in the Caribbean which could develop into a tropical cyclone briefly as it moves into Central America. Day 85 in the Eastern Pacific, and we have the two tropical storms, of course, Emilia and Fabio, and we have the remnants of Carlotta and Daniel, which are still active, but for all intents and purposes they are pretty much gone. Well, in the Western Pacific, of course, we've got this new tropical storm, which has not been named or designated by the JTWC at this point. It is still over near the Japanese islands, and another of interest to its west, a 10% chance of a new development in the next 7 days entering that same kind of region. No areas of interest in the North Indian Ocean at this time. Quiet here, but there is a lot of cloud cover and rain over large parts of India there. And in the southwest Indian Ocean, this is what it looks like right now. Very little going on here as well. Just a few little quite broad cloud cover actually over large parts of the Central Ocean, but not really affecting any land areas. So with all that looked at, let's take a look at the main feature today, and that of course is still Tropical Storm Debby, a tropical storm warning for the Altamaha Sound to Surf City. It is currently 23 kilometers from Tybee Island, 27 from Hilton Head Island, 55 from Beaufort, 65 from Edisto Beach, and 113 from Charleston. A storm surge watch and a tropical storm watch are also still in effect. It could get up to 2 to 4 feet of storm surge along parts of North Carolina and South Carolina later on. That, of course, is if the storm strengthens. Still, the National Hurricane Center betting that it will get back up to 60 miles per hour later on. Well, here it is on satellite imagery, and look how broad it is getting now, to the point where I'm really starting to struggle to find where exactly that center is now. It looks like it's been transposed a little bit further towards the east there from what was looking like a tighter center earlier, and really getting very loose on that eastern side, although the National Hurricane Center do think that that's where the strongest winds still are. There's a super close-up of the late visibles there just before it's got dark, with radar superimposed on that. This is the new storm near the Ogasawara Islands of Japan, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, starting to develop as it continues northwestwards. We reckon it's got tropical storm force winds right now. There was an ASCAP pass earlier in the night local time, which confirmed tropical depression status, and looking at the convection, I reckon it's stronger now. There's another view, wider shot of Debby in the last few hours. Very slow movement towards the east or northeast. It is just pulling out over the water again now, so really again open season on potential strengthening, but the look of its structure right now is extremely poor. We can forget any chat about an eye wall core or anything like that developing. Even the general convection around the storm is very weak as we look at that there on the ZAIR imagery. Very few areas even in the minus 50s. But of course, with its slow movement and lots of bands inland there over South Carolina and eastern Georgia, we could still be looking at very high rainfall accumulations even from this point forward. This is Emilia in the Eastern Pacific, which is near hurricane status now actually, 70 mile per hour winds, an estimated pressure of 988 millibars in very close proximity. You can even see part of it on the top right there to its counterpart Fabio, but there it is on the ZAIR imagery again. Cloud tops into the minus 80s at times. There's Fabio, got a nice little core going on there, but it looks like it may be struggling a little bit as we look at the infrared views. That storm we're putting at 60 miles per hour at this point, and we think that Emilia will still be getting the better of Fabio later on. There's that new system near the Ogasawara Islands of Japan. Small islands out there, relatively low populations, but they are populated, and tropical storm force winds possible and very heavy rainfall over those islands in the next couple of days. It is expected to continue northeastwards and then eventually turn more towards the north later on. Real signs that it could intensify quite a bit further as well as it heads up and maybe go on to affect the mainland of Japan. This is an interesting feature. Another area of interest, 93W I think this was, centered to the southeast of Ryukyu Islands there. And this is the east coast of the United States, a wide shot of course, giving you a full picture of what Debby is up to, and a big frontal system up north there causing severe thunderstorm warnings as well, and a few tornado warnings earlier too. This is the Caribbean region. You can actually see possibly that area of interest. I'm not sure if that's the one or whether it's going to be something that forms behind it. And in the West African region, the east coast of the Atlantic, you can see a few little thunderstorms blowing up, but really not too much to talk about in terms of African waves moving off into the Atlantic. Certainly convection rising over Nicaragua from that potential system there right now, and well to the left hand side you can see that double feature there, those two tropical storms, and here's a better look, and you can still clearly see the shell that's left of Carlotta and Daniel. They're just skeletons at this point, moving out towards the west-northwest. And here's a view of the Western Pacific again, showing that new storm towards the top right, and a lot of monsoonal cloud off to its tail end there over the Philippine Sea. Infrared view into the Indian Ocean, and a lot of unsettled weather across India there. A lot of monsoonal showers continuing, especially further east. The Arabian Sea, not too much going on, but there are rain showers further south, probably affecting the Maldives as well. So sea surface temperatures are still looking really good off the coast of Mexico in the eastern Pacific and all the way up the Gulf of California, of course. Further out to sea, those temperatures are lower, and that of course was the undoing of Carlotta. In the Atlantic, extremely warm temperatures persist in the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, slightly less now off the west coast of Florida, but certainly off Louisiana still sky high, 32 degrees Celsius plus. And off the coast of Florida east there, where Debby is, possibly warmer waters there on the way too. Western Pacific, just to the southwest of Honshu, Japan, really hot spot there in the East China Sea. Also over the Western Pacific proper, we've got those systems active, 30 to 32 degrees Celsius waters. North Indian Ocean looking pretty good, 29 degrees off a few spots off the coast of eastern India and off the southwestern part of Bangladesh. Compared to average, the Atlantic, of course, is very much above. It is around 3 degrees above average in the main development region, 2 to 3 in the Gulf of Mexico, and up to 5 degrees above average off the maritime Canada region in the subtropical zone. In the Eastern Pacific, very warm there as well in a few spots, up to 3 degrees above. Western Pacific, in the main area there, it's around 2 degrees above average. South China Sea up to 3, and off Japan it's 4 to 5 degrees above. Oceanic heat content is still looking decent, 2 distinct patches there in the Western Pacific, and some high values escalating further north now through the Ryukyu Islands. Eastern Pacific not looking so good, but still 1 or 2 little spots here and there for potential purple patches for tropical cyclones. In the Atlantic, there's plenty of energy here all across the Caribbean Sea, in the northern part of it at least, especially the western region. Gulf of Mexico looking good in a few spots there as well, and off the coast of the east coast there, a little bit further out to sea than where Debby is right now, there's a few moderate values. GFS model calls for the storm to be stalling quite a bit, and then it turns back around and then back inland very close to Charleston there for its landfall, and then moving inland northwestwards and then northeastwards. So a bit of a hook there rather than a bend, turning back around and back up there, and eventually being shoveled off towards the northeast post-tropical by the time it gets through Virginia and then out through the east coast of Canada. All 4 systems still visible on GFS model. Eventually, it looks like Fabio wins on that particular run there, swallowing up Emilia. Well, it looks like one is going to get the better of the other. I'm not sure if it's going to happen quite like that. I think what might be more likely is that one storm will just completely die off in the shadow of the other one. And then this is the further eastern Pacific region, where we could see another system forming later on. I think that was Fabio that won. Just second look at that, I couldn't actually tell. It may have been Emilia. And this is the western Pacific, that system broadening and strengthening as it continues northwards. Maybe a few satellite systems too out to its east, eventually becoming a typhoon very far north, and then actually making landfall near the northern tip of Japan there, the northern tip of Honshu. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that actually, so that would be certainly a turn up for the books if something like that was to happen. We're pretty sure in any case it's going to be moving in a northerly direction. Not sea surface temperatures, but the rainfall expectations over the next 7 days. Well, on top of what we've already had, of course, I don't think it's turned out to be a worst case scenario, but it is still pretty bad. We are expecting up to 10 inches of further rainfall in eastern parts of Georgia, and also for parts of Virginia, North Carolina I should say, near the border with Virginia there, near just north of the Outer Banks, getting up towards 9 inches. In the state of New York as well, a secondary region there when it turns post-tropical, getting above 8 inches in the central part of the state. In the longer range, day 5 to 10, you can see that small system continuing off towards the west-northwest. We didn't see much of that second Atlantic system. The chances of formation are low, and eventually that eastern Pacific system dies off quite quickly, so there isn't actually much left to track apart from those two that may happen later on into next week. So at the moment, fingers crossed, we might have a little bit of quiet on our hands, at least in this region. However, it's not quiet everywhere. The Western Pacific has some more ideas, more systems potentially forming there in the same region that we've got the current one. There's a new typhoon forming up and going on to affect Kyushu. It's quite a strong typhoon actually, at least category 2. Two other storms forming down there as well. One to the west of Taiwan this time, and another one near Hainan Island in China. So potentially 3 active tropical cyclones by the time we get to the end of the 10-day period. None of those have been marked yet though, so still a big dose of caution. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store. We can take a look at all our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. And our Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt is still available, as well as the Wiener costume I'll be wearing whenever that storm finally forms. And in the silly range, the very long range, day 10 to 16, those 3 systems continuing, maybe a 4th one out to its east, and the re-emergence of that typhoon actually strengthening possibly to major typhoon status, looking annular at a time there, stalling a lot, and then eventually moving off towards the east, really trolling Japan there after moving over Kyushu for quite a long time. I mean, that really would be a rainmaker if that one was to persist in that way, but it is still a very long way out and things may change quite a lot before then. On this day, another big hitter, it was Typhoon Doug, which reached Category 5 status on August 6th. It had just dropped back down to Category 4 on the 7th and was heading for a very close call with Taipei in the northern tip of Taiwan as it sideswiped that region. And we also had Tropical Storm Hector forming in the eastern Pacific, 8E, which would eventually become Hurricane Lee in the central Pacific, and 18W, already up to 18 by this point in the western Pacific there that year, which would eventually develop, I think if I recall correctly, back in 1994. And 30 years later, here we are with the same naming lists in the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, of course with a few retirees out of the question. Ernesto is next in the Atlantic. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Gilmer. And in the Central Pacific, of course, it's still Hone. It feels like it's been since 1994 since we had the last storm over there. In the Western Pacific, the next name is still Maria, but it might be arriving very shortly, followed by Son Tin. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name is Asna. Well, we have had a bit of a bump up with our numbers now for our yearly totals. We're now up to 33 storms for the year. Next name in Australia is Robin, whenever that gets going. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, it's Ansha. And in the South Pacific, it's Pitta. That's all for now. We'll be back again with another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night. Become an Ultimate Fan today.